like to take a moment just to welcome you to our 2018 Veterans Day Convocation. Today, our purpose is to take time to remember those that have served our country, those that are currently serving our country, and those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice in serving our country. Before we begin, I'd like to take this brief moment to have any veterans or those who are currently serving to please stand so that you may be recognized. They're in the back. Turn around. Let's give a big round of applause. We're going to open our program with a combined performance by our band and choir, and let me be the first to thank them for their hard work, their time that they put into this program, and especially to Mrs. Mole, who's helped me set up the auditorium and prepared our band and choir. Thank you.
The history of taps. The revision that gave us present-day taps was made during America's Civil War by Union General Daniel Adams Butterfield, heading a brigade camped at Harrison Landing, Virginia, near Richmond. Up to that time, the U.S. Army's infantry call to end the day was the French final call, l'extinction des feux. General Butterfield decided that the lights out music was too formal to signal the day's end. One day, in July 1862, he recalled the tattoo music and hummed a version of it to an aide, who wrote it down in music. Butterfield then asked the brigade bugler, Oliver W. Norton, to play the notes, and after listening, lengthened and shortened them while keeping his original melody. He ordered Norton to play this new call at the end of each day thereafter, instead of the regulation call. The music was heard and appreciated by other brigades, who asked for copies and adopted this bugle call. It was even adopted by Confederate buglers. This music was made the official Army bugle call after the war, but not given the name taps until 1874. The first time taps was played at a military funeral may have also been in Virginia, soon after Butterfield composed it. Union Captain John Tidball, head of an artillery battery, ordered it played for the burial of a cannoneer killed in action. Not wanting to reveal the battery's position in the woods to the enemy nearby, Tidball substituted taps for the battery's for the traditional 3-rifle volleys fired over the grave. Taps was played at the funeral for Confederate General Stonewall Jackson 10 months after it was composed. Army infantry regulations by 1891 required taps to be played at military funeral ceremonies. Taps now is played by the military at burial and memorial services to accompany the lowering of the flag and to signal the lights out command at day's end. Please join me in solemn remembrance of all veterans on this day with the playing of taps.
United States Army. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we continue to celebrate our veterans, I believe it's important to understand how we have arrived at this day for the celebration of America's veterans. World War I, known as the time as the Great War, officially ended when the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919, in the Palace of Versailles outside of the town Versailles, France. However, fighting ceased 7 months earlier when an armistice or temporary cessation of hostilities between the Allied nations and Germany went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. For that reason, November 11th, 1918 is generally regarded as the end of the war to end all wars. In November 1919, President Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day. From that point, Armistice Day was primarily a day set aside to honor veterans of World War I. But in 1954, after World War II had required the greatest mobilization of soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen in the nation's history, and after American forces had fought aggression in Korea, the 83rd Congress passed legislation making November 11th Veterans Day. As I said earlier, we come to this time to accomplish three things. The first is to take time to recognize those currently serving our country. How can you do that? When you leave today and see someone that's in uniform, approach them and simply thank them for their service. You don't have to say anything that's eloquent. You don't even have to make a 5-minute speech. Just simply say, thanks for your service. The second is to take time to remember those that made the ultimate sacrifice serving their country. For those in attendance last year, you'll remember 2005 Speedway graduate Sergeant John K. Rankle, who made the ultimate sacrifice while serving in Afghanistan. The third and final way we can remember and honor those who serve is to learn a little bit about one of the greatest military invasions to ever take place and meeting those that were involved on a personal level. D-Day, June 6, 1944. The U.S. Army Center of Military History in Washington, D.C. numbers 6,036 American casualties including wounded and missing. The Heritage Foundation in Washington estimates 4,900 dead, totaling close to 10,000. What did it mean for America?
D-Day, the largest, most ambitious invasion in the history of warfare. 200,000 soldiers, 11,000 ships. The Allies could settle for nothing less than victory, whatever the cost. But it was the soldiers who landed at Omaha Beach who paid the highest price.
It's the only place in the world where you can walk in the footsteps of the very brave.
Normandy, northern France. This 6-mile stretch of sandy beach is where the liberation of Europe from Nazi occupation began. On 6th of June 1944, this was the scene of one of the bloodiest and most desperate battles of the 20th century. Many of the young soldiers who fought there had never been in combat before. It's a story of immense courage against the odds. A moment in history that inspired Steven Spielberg's film Saving Private Ryan.
An awful lot of our very best young men made the ultimate sacrifice, gave up their lives for your freedom and mine on D-Day at Omaha Beach.
The Normandy countryside has changed little since the war. The battlefields remain undisturbed. The beaches are tucked out of the way down narrow country roads.
Let me tell you how to do it. You drive in off of the N-17 into the cemetery and turn right at your first opportunity and you'll find a little parking lot there. And you park there and you go straight down to the beach. In the process, you're going to go by the engineering monument that was put up, I don't know, about 10 years ago. And then you're going by the German bunker. And this bunker had a 75mm cannon in it. You can crawl in. And you stand there in that German fortification, and you're looking down 6 miles of golden sand. It's the best view of Omaha Beach that I can imagine. And of course, you're filled with all kinds of emotions, because nobody knew they're going to have some idea what happened here.
For visitors to this part of France, it is impossible to escape the past when you see the faded grandeur of the old coastal towns. The countryside in Normandy may not have changed much since the war, but the political landscape certainly has. In 1944, mainland Europe was under Hitler's control. But the tide of war was beginning to turn. The Germans had been defeated at Stalingrad, and the Eastern Front had collapsed as the Russians forced them back. In the West, the combined might of the Allied forces was massing in southern England, preparing to mount an invasion. U.S. Army General Dwight Eisenhower was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied forces. He masterminded the operation, a plan so complex it took 18 months to prepare.
The build-up in England was so immense that we got a toehold on the continent and began pouring in these men and supplies. We were going to win the war, but it was a touch-and-go thing. Hitler might very well have thrown the Allies back into the sea, and at Omaha Beach especially, he came close to it.
American troops began to arrive in England as early as 1942, many of them under 20 years of age and who had never experienced the horrors of war. It was these soldiers who were picked to lead the assault on June the 6th.
My name is Richard Atkins. I was in Company D on 16th Infantry.
John Robert Slaughter, call me Bob. I was in D Company, 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Division.
Bob Slaughter left school at 16 to join the army. Within 2 years, he was a sergeant in charge of a squad of 9 men.
David Silva, Company D, 1st Battalion.
David Silva put his career as a priest on hold to join the National Guard at the age of 18.
My name is Marvin May. I was in the National Guard outfit of the 29th Division.
Marvin Mapes was a semi-professional baseball player from Virginia when he joined the 29th Division.
My name is Ernest Boegel, Boegel.
California, that is Boegel, was a shop assistant before the war. By D-Day, he was a second lieutenant.
These were citizen soldiers. These were all kids that had never been in combat before. These were kids that were told by their briefings, look, about half of you are going to be dead before the war's over. One guy from the 116th told me he heard that, and he said, I looked to my right, and I looked to my left, and I thought, you poor bastard. They were kids. They were 17. I know one, Bob Slaughter, was 17 years old. They were 18. They were 19 years old. Of course they were going to live forever. The girls weren't going to get there. They were too young, too good looking. Their mother loved them too much.
June the 6th was the last day of their innocence. The onslaught they had home to survivors for the rest of their lives.
Machine gun bullets were there. I never realized battleground could be that intense. They were just targets. Machine gun bullets were there. Nobody stopped to help nobody. Never
I
realized.
know people were doing death and dying right there on the island. We were trained to get off that boat and go forward.
They were just
You
targets.
hear people like they're screaming, hollering. Nobody would go out and help them. They just lay out there and scream until they die.
Showed you that video so that you would know what it meant to America and so that you could see some of the men who served. But let's make it a little bit more personal, shall we? I'm sure most of you right now are looking at the screen and making a connection right away. Yes, this is the same Roseboro name in relation to our Mr. Roseboro that teaches here at the high school. I'll call him Eric from this point on because I taught him in class, I coached him in basketball. Yes, it's also the same Roseboro name that many of you are familiar with after attending Speedway Junior High School and getting to know Mr. Roseboro as your assistant principal or principal. You see, all these men served our country during World War II. All these men sacrificed for our country. All these men did make it home to live full lives. All these men made it possible for me to work with Mr. Roseboro at Speedway Junior High School when I was a teacher there, and has allowed me to teach, coach, and now work with Mr. Roseboro here at the high school. Delmer Spears, it's Eric's grandfather, Mr. Roseboro's father-in-law. He served from 1943 to 1945. He was a radio on a B-17 Flying Fortress. He served in the European theater with his first combat mission, flying aerial support for the invasion of Normandy, D-Day. He flew 22 successful missions. When you flew 25, you got to go home. After one successful mission, their mechanic counted over 130 holes in their aircraft that needed repaired. On his 23rd mission, 2 missions away from going home, while flying as the lead plane, their pilot decided to maintain the course while taking on heavy anti-aircraft fire, knowing that the other bombers were bombs away based on their airplane. Shortly after bombs away and a successful strike of their target, a rail bridge, their B-17 was struck, exploding their oxygen tank and forcing bailout in enemy territory. The pilot died. 3 were taken as prisoner of war, my grandfather being one of them. This is Eric writing. And the remaining 6 were taken by the French underground. My grandfather was knocked unconscious when landing in a tree. When he woke up, German soldiers were cutting his parachute out of the tree and took him captive. Due to overcrowded POW camps, he and 9,000 plus other soldiers were forced on a march spanning nearly 600 miles during the winter months across France and Germany. He spent the remainder of the war, 9.5 months, including his 21st birthday and Christmas, as a prisoner of war. In addition to his POW medal, he earned the Air Medal with multiple clusters. He passed away in 2005. Willard Roseboro, identical twin brother to Elmer Roseboro, uncle, and great-uncle. He also served 4 years and fought with the 4th Infantry Division of the European Theater, injured shortly after D-Day, earning his first Purple Heart. He was sent back to the battle after 3 months of healing in England. He was injured again and earned his second Purple Heart. In addition to the 2 Purple Hearts, he earned a Bronze Star and a Combat Infantry Badge. He never told anyone why he got the Bronze Star, but he would only say, "I guess I saved somebody or something," and then quickly change the subject. Now on to Elmer Roseboro. Served from 1942 to 1945. He fought in 7 major battles in the European theater during that time, including Hürtgen Forest, Rhine River, the invasion of Normandy, D-Day, and the Battle of the Bulge. These are actual photographs he took while in combat. He spent 26 months of his 4 years of service overseas, held occupancy in Europe after Victory in Europe Day, and was in charge of 150 soldiers and civilians before being sent home. He was discharged with the 574th Ambulance Battalion, but spent the majority of the war fighting with the 101st Infantry. To this day, there are still things that trigger nightmares for him. This is him in front of bomb craters. But like most from his era, he doesn't say anything about his experience. Now, I've gone through all this, and bear with me for just another minute as I point out that we should remember those who served, especially those from World War II. Those serving in World War II are dying at a rate of 348 per day. That's about 14 every hour. Predictions are that sometime around 2029, all participants will have passed away. I've talked about what we should do for veterans on this day and moving forward. The best part of this day, though, is that we get to start showing our appreciation right now. Let's give a warm welcome and an ovation to a true American hero who just recently celebrated his 100th birthday, Mr. Elmer Roseboro. I'd also like to point out as well, as I thank Mr. Roseboro for his service, his wife of 70 years is also in the audience today, so we appreciate her being here as well. They just celebrated their 70th anniversary at the start of October, so let's have a round of applause for that as well. As we close our program today, I just hope that as you leave this auditorium, that you go forward remembering those that have served, those that are currently serving, and those that paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I would challenge you that any time that you get to see a living hero who has served their country, that you make sure that you thank them for their service. At this time, we are dismissed.